AITA for asking my husband to stop funding my MIL and SIL's lifestyle. 6 years of marriage. 6 years of loving, supporting, and building a life together, or at least, that is what I thought I was doing. I have always been the one to take on most of the financial burden in our marriage. It was not something I resented in the beginning because I made more money. A lot more, actually. My salary has always been about double what my husband earns, and from the start, it felt natural to me to step up and handle the bigger expenses. The rent, the insurance, the utilities, it was all on me. He covered the groceries and a few smaller things here and there, and I never really questioned it because, in my mind, we were working as a team. For the past few years, I have been bringing up the idea of buying a house and starting a family. Every time I mentioned it, he would shut it down. He had an arsenal of excuses always at the ready. "We do not have enough money," he would say. "A baby is expensive," he reminded me constantly. "Buying a house is a huge responsibility. We should wait until we are more financially stable." And I trusted him. I believed that he was being responsible, that he wanted to make sure we were in the best possible place before making such huge commitments. So, I did what any rational person would do, I started saving. I cut back on unnecessary expenses, picked up extra work, and made sure to put money aside for our future. Our future. That was what I kept telling myself. Every sacrifice, every long night, every bit of stress, it was all for the life we were supposed to be building together. Then, a few weeks ago, I found out the truth. I wish I could say I discovered it through some dramatic confrontation, some big revelation that hit me all at once, but no. It was quiet. Insidious. I was going through some bank statements, something I rarely did because we mostly kept our finances separate. But for some reason that day, I felt compelled to take a closer look. And that was when I saw it. A mortgage payment. A significant one. And it was not for anything we owned. My first thought was that it was some mistake, some mix-up at the bank. But as I kept digging, it became painfully clear, my husband had been making mortgage payments on a house. A house I knew nothing about. At first, I thought, maybe, just maybe, he had secretly bought a house for us. Maybe this was some elaborate surprise that he had been planning all along. But the deeper I dug, the worse it got. This was not our house. It was his sister's. For years, he had been lying to me about our financial situation while secretly buying a house for his sister. Not only that, but he had also been funding her lifestyle, paying for trips, covering her expenses, making sure she had everything she needed, all while telling me we could not afford a house, all while telling me we could not afford to have a baby. And the worst part? His sister is not some struggling, helpless woman who needed his support. She has a job. A good one. She is fully capable of taking care of herself, yet my husband had decided, without consulting me, without even mentioning it, that our money, our future, should go to her instead. I confronted him, of course. I laid everything out, asked him how he could do this to me, to us. He did not even look guilty. Instead, he was defensive. He told me that it was his responsibility to take care of his sister, that she needed him, that family helps each other. When I asked why he never told me, why he kept it a secret while making me believe we were struggling, his response was cold. He said I would not have understood. That I would have been selfish about it. That I would have made a big deal out of it. As if I was the problem. I asked him to stop. I told him that I could not accept this, that he needed to put our marriage first, that he needed to stop sending money to his sister, stop paying for her house. And he refused. Flat out refused. He said he could not and would not abandon her, no matter what it meant for us. And that was when it hit me. I had spent years trying to build a life with someone who never truly saw me as his priority. I had been breaking my back, working late, saving, planning, sacrificing, all for a future that only I was invested in. All while he was using our resources, my hard work, to take care of someone else. I do not know where to go from here. I feel betrayed in a way that I cannot even put into words. It is not just about the money, it is about the lies, the manipulation, the complete disregard for our marriage. I thought we were partners, but now, I am realizing that I have been alone in this all along. Update 1. The betrayal I felt was overwhelming, suffocating. I could barely see straight from the sheer frustration, the anger boiling inside me as I stood there, demanding answers. And he just stood there, defensive, unwilling to admit he had done anything wrong. That was the moment I realized this was bigger than just finances. It was about trust, trust that had been shattered so thoroughly, I did not know if it could ever be repaired. But as it turns out, the betrayal was even deeper than I initially thought. It happened by accident. A few days after our fight, I was still reeling from everything, still processing the fact that the man I had married had spent years lying to me about our financial situation. I felt like I was living with a stranger, someone I had dedicated my life to, only to find out he had never been honest with me. I had no idea where we stood, whether we could move forward from this, whether I even wanted to try. And then, by pure chance, I found out he had been lying about something even bigger. I was going through some old documents, trying to clear my head, when I stumbled upon something that made my blood run cold, an old tax document from a few years ago. The numbers didn't add up. The income listed was significantly higher than what he had always told me he made. At first, I thought it had to be outdated, that maybe he had taken a pay cut at some point. But the more I looked, the more I realized that wasn't the case. It was recent enough that there was no way his salary could have dropped that drastically. My hands were shaking as I dug deeper, checking everything I could get my hands on. And that was when it hit me, he had been lying to me about his salary this entire time. For years, he had convinced me he was barely getting by, that we were struggling, that we couldn't afford to build the life I desperately wanted. And yet, here was proof that he had been making significantly more than what he had ever told me. More than enough to contribute to a house for us, to help with the expenses I had been carrying alone. More than enough to do all the things he had been telling me were impossible. I lost it. This wasn't just about prioritizing his sister over our marriage anymore, this was about the fact that he had manipulated me into thinking we were financially stretched when, in reality, he had been withholding his income from me. I confronted him again, this time even angrier, even more hurt than before. The words tumbled out of me, accusations flying as I demanded an explanation. He tried to deny it at first, but when he saw the proof in my hands, he crumbled. And then, he started crying. It was jarring to see him like that, so completely broken, tears streaming down his face as he finally admitted the truth. He said he was embarrassed. Embarrassed that he had never been able to provide anything for his mother, that his father had left them with nothing, that they had spent years barely scraping by while he watched other families build wealth and stability. He told me that his mother had never owned a home, that they had always rented, always struggled. He said it killed him to see her living that way, never knowing what it felt like to have security, to have something of her own. He wanted to change that for her. He wanted to give her something permanent, something she would never have to worry about losing. And that was when he told me the truth, the house wasn't technically his. His sister had taken out the loan in her name, but he was the one paying for it. It was his way of making sure his mother had a home, without putting his mother's name on any paperwork that could financially burden her. His sister was essentially acting as a middleman, someone who could sign the papers and make it look like the house belonged to her, while in reality, it was my husband who was covering the mortgage. I felt like the air had been knocked out of my lungs. It wasn't that I didn't understand why he wanted to do this for his mother, I did. I could even respect the desire to provide for her, to make up for the struggles they had gone through. But what I couldn't understand was why he had hidden it from me, why he had chosen to lie to me over and over instead of just telling me the truth. I was his wife. The person he had vowed to build a life with. And yet, instead of trusting me, he had spent years deceiving me, making me believe he was struggling just as much as I was, all while funneling his money into a house for his mother and sister. And now, he was begging me to understand. He swore he would start saving for our future home, that he would finally start contributing to the life we were supposed to be building together. But he refused, flat out refused, to stop paying for his mother's house. He said he couldn't do that to her, that he couldn't just take it away after all these years. And what hurt the most was that I realized, in that moment, that no matter what happened, no matter how much he tried to convince me otherwise, his priority would never be me. It would always be them. And the worst part? His sister wasn't even struggling. She wasn't some helpless woman who had nowhere else to go, no way to support herself. She had a good job, a stable income, and yet, here she was, living in a house my husband had bought, paying a mortgage he had convinced me we could never afford. And my mother-in-law, she had moved in too. The two of them, living comfortably in a house that had drained my husband's resources, while I had spent years thinking we were too broke to start our own family. I didn't know what to do. I didn't even know what to say anymore. The betrayal felt too deep, too painful to move past. And the worst part? He had been able to keep all of this from me so easily. We had separate accounts, and so it was easy for him to lie about his salary and how much he could pitch in. Update 2. The days that followed felt like I was living in a fog, a thick, suffocating weight that settled over every part of me. My mind felt like it had been split in two, one part still desperately trying to cling to the version of my marriage I had believed in for years, the other unable to ignore the truth that had unraveled before me. I had spent so long thinking we were building something together, but now, looking back, I wondered if I had simply been carrying everything alone. The weight of our future, the financial burdens, the emotional labor, it had all been on my shoulders, while he quietly funneled his money elsewhere, creating a life for his mother and sister while leaving me to fend for myself. The betrayal felt deeper than I could process. It was not just about the money, though that alone was bad enough. It was the deception, the years of excuses, the way he had allowed me to struggle while he played the role of devoted son and brother, ensuring his real family was taken care of. And I, the person who was supposed to be his partner, had been completely shut out, lied to, and left in the dark. I could not talk to him. Every conversation turned into a fight, the tension thick and unbearable. I would start with calm, measured words, hoping against hope that there was some way to get through to him, some way to make him see how wrong this was. But it never took long for the frustration to boil over, for the anger to spill out of me. And every single time, he met me with defensiveness, with weak justifications, with an unwillingness to truly face what he had done. He saw it as a noble act, a son taking care of his family. But what about me? What about us? Had I ever truly been part of his family in his eyes? Or had I just been a convenient source of stability, someone to keep the lights on while he poured his resources into the people he actually prioritized? I could not talk to my friends. The shame was unbearable. How could I look them in the eye and admit that I had let myself be so completely deceived? That I had spent years shouldering the weight of our home, our future, only to find out that he had never even been trying to build a life with me? That I had been so blind to the truth? It made me feel small. Weak. Like an idiot who had willingly allowed herself to be used, who had ignored the signs because I wanted so badly to believe that my husband saw me as his partner instead of his financial safety net. So, I did the only thing I could think of. I called his mother. I told myself I would stay calm. That I would not go in angry, that I would not yell or accuse or let my emotions get the best of me. I wanted her to understand where I was coming from, to see that I was not trying to take her son away from her, that I only wanted fairness. I had convinced myself that if I approached the conversation the right way, if I made her see reason, there might be a way to fix this. I wanted to believe she would listen. I started gently. I told her that I understood why my husband felt so obligated to help. That I respected his desire to take care of his family, that I could even admire it in some ways. That I knew what it meant to love your family so much that you wanted to give them everything. But then I told her that he had another family now, too. That he had made vows, promises, that he had built a life with someone else. That he was married. That he had a wife, a home, and a future that needed to matter just as much as the one he had been trying to create for them. I told her that I needed him to start thinking about his own household just as much as he had been thinking about hers. Her response was nothing short of chilling. She did not yell. She did not get defensive. She did not sound angry or guilty or even surprised. She was simply indifferent, as if the things I was saying had never even occurred to her as relevant. As if my marriage to her son was some distant, trivial thing that had no real weight compared to what truly mattered. And then she said it, so casually, so certainly, that it sent ice through my veins. He is an adult and can decide how he wants to spend his money. It is natural for a son to take care of his mother. That is expected. I felt my pulse hammering in my ears, but I kept my voice steady. I agree, I said. But he also has a responsibility to me, his wife. Marriage is a partnership. He cannot keep funneling all of his money into his mother's house while I carry everything else. That is not fair. She barely hesitated before responding, her voice eerily calm, as if she was explaining something to a child who simply did not understand how the world worked. Your mistake is thinking you're more important than his real family. Wives can come and go. Mothers and sisters are forever. The words hit like a slap. The certainty in her voice, the sheer conviction that I was temporary, that I was nothing more than a passing phase in her son's life, left me speechless. As if I was merely an outsider, someone who had come into their family but would never truly belong. As if my role in his life would never compare to theirs. As if I had no place at all beyond what was convenient for them. I sat there, stunned, trying to process what I had just heard. And then, without another word, I hung up. I do not know how long I sat there, but it felt like hours. The weight of her words settled over me like a suffocating blanket, pressing down until I could hardly breathe. I had always known that his mother had influence over him. That she was the kind of woman who expected unwavering devotion from her son. But I had never truly understood just how deep it ran. I had spent years believing that my marriage was the most important thing in his life, that we were equals, that our family was the priority. But in her eyes, and, I was beginning to suspect, in his, I was nothing. A placeholder. A passing commitment that could be replaced, discarded, forgotten. The more I replayed the conversation in my mind, the angrier I became. This was not just about the money anymore. This was about respect. It was about the fact that his family did not see me as his wife, as his partner, as someone whose needs mattered. They saw me as a financial asset. A resource. Someone who could provide while they reaped the benefits. I refused to let that be the end of it. If his mother saw no issue with what was happening, maybe his sister would. Maybe she would be more reasonable, more understanding. So, I called her next. I laid it out as clearly as possible. I told her that my husband needed to start saving for our future, that it was not fair for him to be the only one paying for their house while I carried the entire weight of our household. I thought she would at least acknowledge that it was not a sustainable arrangement. But instead, she laughed. "But you make so much money," she said, dismissively. "You're fine. You can cover everything for your marriage. Why do you even care?" That was when I realized that none of them had ever considered me part of the equation. They did not see me as his partner. They saw me as a convenient safety net. I waited for my husband to get home that night. And then, as soon as he stepped inside, I told him everything, what his mother had said, what his sister had said, how they saw me as nothing more than an ATM. And for the first time since all of this started, he actually looked shaken. Update 3. My husband sat in silence for a long time after I told him everything. He didn't try to defend them, didn't rush to dismiss what I had said, didn't immediately turn the blame on me like he had so many times before. He just sat there, eyes staring at some invisible point on the floor, his face unreadable. I could see the weight of my words pressing down on him, see the way his hands clenched and unclenched as if he was trying to grasp something solid in the middle of all this unraveling. And then he did something I hadn't expected, he looked genuinely shocked. Not just by what his mother and sister had said, but by the realization that they had no intention of ever seeing me as part of his family. He kept repeating, "They actually said that?" Like he couldn't believe it, like it was something he had never even considered a possibility before. And I just sat there, exhausted, waiting to see what he would do with this information. I had spent years feeling like an outsider in my own marriage, like I was fighting against something I couldn't even fully name. But now, he was finally seeing it too. The stark reality of what his family truly thought of me was right in front of him, and for the first time, he couldn't look away. I waited for him to rationalize it, to tell me that I had misunderstood, that they hadn't meant it that way. But he didn't. He just sat there, absorbing it, as the silence stretched between us. Then he did something unexpected. He said, "I need to talk to them." I didn't hold my breath. I had already spent years being pushed aside for them, watching him choose them over me in every way that mattered. Words were easy. Action was something else entirely. I told myself that if he wanted to have that conversation, fine, but I wouldn't let myself hope for too much. I had done that before, and all it had ever brought me was disappointment. But the next day, he actually confronted them. I wasn't there for the conversation, but I didn't need to be. I could picture exactly how it played out. He told his sister that if she was going to live in the house, she needed to start contributing to the mortgage, that he couldn't be the only one paying for it anymore, not when he had a wife, not when he had a future that he needed to think about. And of course, she didn't take it well. She accused me of turning him against his family, of being selfish, of trying to take him away from them. In her mind, he was betraying them, choosing a woman over the people who had been there for him his entire life. Because to them, I wasn't part of his life. I was an intrusion, an inconvenience, someone who was disrupting the arrangement that had worked perfectly fine for them before I came along. His mother wasn't any better. She told him he was being ungrateful, that after everything she had done for him growing up, he owed her this. That it was his duty to take care of her, to take care of his sister, to be the man of their family before he ever thought about being a husband to me. But something had shifted in him. He told her, I will always take care of you, but I can't do it alone. I can't ignore my own family for you. It didn't go over well. His mother was furious. His sister was even angrier. They saw it as a betrayal, an unforgivable act of disloyalty. And I knew, in that moment, that things between them would never be the same again. He had spent his entire life bending to their needs, giving them everything, making sure they were taken care of no matter the cost to himself. And now, for the first time, he was saying no. When he came home, he didn't say anything at first. He just sat down heavily, as if the weight of everything that had happened was finally catching up to him. And then he turned to me and said, I want to start saving for our house. I didn't know whether to believe him. I had spent so long thinking I was fighting this battle alone, so long trying to push forward while he resisted every step of the way. Words were easy, and I had heard plenty of them before. But something about this felt different. And over the next few weeks, he actually started proving it. He started showing me his paychecks. He let me see his bank statements, something he had never done before. He set up a savings account specifically for our future, for us, and made the first deposit without hesitation. He didn't flinch when I asked questions about his finances. He didn't make excuses. He didn't brush me off. And for the first time in years, I felt like he was actually trying.